I am Dr Soumyadip Chattopadhyay, an associate professor at Visva-Bharati University, Shantiniketan, and senior fellow of this Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi. On behalf of the Center for Habitat Urban Regional Studies at IMPRI and Team IMPRI, I welcome you all to this city conversation, which we are going to start today. And all of us know that the cities around the world are currently experiencing the downside of ever increasing globalization and urbanization. And the COVID-19 pandemic has put the social and spatial disparities within cities under a magnifying lens like never before. And the Census of India revealed that the 377 million people live in urban areas in India in 2011, with a projected increase to around 600 million by 2030 alone. And by UN estimates, the urban residents in India will account for about 52.8% of the population by 2050. And according to the Indian Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs report, India faced about 37% decadal growth in the number of slum households. And the most recent estimation from 2013 projected that by 2017, about 104 million Indians will live in slums. In fact, after China, India is indeed projected to have the largest share of world population living in slums in 2020. And this growth definitely comes with some massive challenges, including that of access to opportunity, space, technology, infrastructure, safety, all balanced with preservation of the environment and the natural resources. However, the infrastructural development in urban areas has not been able to keep up with the increasing population growth in India. A vast majority of the urban population, especially those living in the slums and peri-urban areas, still lack access to basic services, including water, sanitation, solid waste management, adequate housing facilities. And the situation will likely only worsen as India continues to urbanize at a rapid pace. In fact, the problems are very basic in nature. For example, the role of hand washing in the prevention of communicable diseases has been known for over a century, yet it remains severely neglected as a public health investment. And the importance is only rediscovered, or rather we only rediscovered the importance of hand washing during this pandemic time. And many urban residents rely on this community water and toilet facilities, which actually accelerates the possibilities of being infected. And the physical distancing is also often impossible in these overcrowded areas. Many residents have irregular income and unstable jobs, and there are no social safety nets to support them and their families. In fact, in recent times, the experts have been questioning this conventional wisdom that urban density and contagion risk go hand in hand. It is the economic geography, not the physical geography in itself, that shapes how cities respond, and will ultimately emerge from these public health crises. So it is extremely crucial to prioritize to prioritize the policies to control social and economic exclusion in the cities with the aim of leaving no one behind. Existing cities need to change as they grow, but the question is how. When it comes to planning our cities, do we keep going on the same way, pushing the same ideas, just maybe with some more energy, or should we try to identify and acknowledge the inherent flaws in our existing approach? So the COVID-19 crisis actually needs to be approached as an opportunity to rethink the ways we organize cities, design economic activities, and set up the decision-making processes at different scales. And most importantly, what we believe is that the policymakers, they need to consider that any city-related specific policy intervention should not emerge only because out of crisis, but should be a tool for inclusive long-term planning. We need to build cities that are livable, that are enjoyable for the majority in cities, not for just a few. But that is obviously not an easy task. So the Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies at IMPRI, along with Industria Global and City Makers Mission International, has launched a discussion series, The State of Cities, the City Conversation. In this talk series, we plan to engage with experts on urban and regional studies to understand the challenges of urbanization and making the cities sustainable and inclusive. And we are honored and delighted to have with us today someone who has the experience of running and managing a city, Mr. Tikender Panwar. So let me introduce Mr. Tikender Panwar first. So he was the directly elected deputy mayor of Shimla city, and actually he is joining us directly from Shimla. And he was interested in to create a vision with the development plan that speaks about inclusive growth, greater planned social infrastructure, and in making not just the city, but the city's resilient. And Mr. Panwar was also a member of the National Task Force in the country to review the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, which speaks about democratic decentralized urban governance. And he is also supervising the vision document for Laytown and has contributed towards it. He is the advisor to Visva-Bharati, a major think tank in the country. He is the convener of the National Coalition for Inclusive and Sustainable Urbanization. And apart from this, Mr. Panwar has participated on many international events. To name a few, he was the part of the delegation of South Africa. He was part of the team to represent the city in the World Congress of Resilient Cities in Seoul and Bonn. He was the part of delegation for COP21 and speaker for cities in France on climate change talks. He represented the city on a training program in Singapore, NTU University. He was a speaker in the UN Habitat 3 conference in Quito. And Mr. Panwar contributes regularly to all the leading newspapers and magazines on urban issues. And he also hosts a weekly show called Urban Agenda on Swaraj Express. A very warm welcome to Mr. Tikender Panwar to this particular show on the city's conversation. And today, he will deliberate on the topic, which is the urban practices in post-COVID era towards innovative solution and participatory governance. So now the floor is yours, Mr. Panwar, please.
Thank you, Dr. Soumyadip, and it's indeed a pleasure to speak today, especially the topic that you have just underlined, the state of cities and, of course, participatory governance, which is so essential for the entire gamut of ideas when we speak about sustainability, sustainable cities. But please pardon me, Dr. Soumyadip, because I have a very bad reputation of being a very critical speaker, in the sense that so I don't want to lose that reputation of mine. So please pardon me for that. And what I'm going to do is, because instead of letting it to be a unilateral affair, so instead of speaking for a longer time, I would try to curtail and speak for, say, 20-25 minutes. Give a background, I mean, how I view and estimate the present situation, and then probably we can just jump over to questions so that things become clearer and actually also a kind of interactive session between the participants and what I'm trying to build up. But before that, Dr. Soumyadip, I think it's very essential what you actually. I just want to develop what you have based. The proposition that you have laid, and that speaks about the whole issue of sustainable cities or inclusive development. And actually, both are very dialectically linked. I mean, you cannot have a sustainable city without inclusive development. And when we speak about inclusive development, I think there are three very essential key elements for inclusive development. One is the ecological ecosystems that we are working in the city. Number two happens to be the social matrix within the city. I mean, what is the social composition? What kind of social stratification are we building up? And I think third is the entire economic paradigm. I mean, what you very brilliantly placed. I mean, the kind of inequality or inequity that gets developed. So if we have to take these three important elements into consideration, I'll try to dwell on each of these rather for a very short period. But I think that would speak about inclusive cities, and that would actually build the entire argument for inclusive development. And if we are not doing that, and unfortunately, let me make that comment right at the inception, actually we are not doing that. And it's indeed a disaster that we are building for the future or for the ensuing years. Now, why I say so? I think one of my famous poets, and I quote it. Some of the participants must have heard it earlier also. And one of my famous poets that I read in my school days is P.B. Shelley, Percy Bysshe Shelley. And exactly 2 centuries ago, 200 years ago, he wrote a poem called Hell is a City Much Like London, exactly 200 years ago. So I think when I draw a corollary, it's quite similar with our cities. I mean, when I say similar with our cities, I mean, just close your eyes and imagine what we did in this pandemic. Can we imagine after the lockdown, not even 24 hours, could we hold our migrant people? I mean, the migrant people who have actually built these cities, we could not sustain them even for 24 hours. Why? For the simple reason they knew they were prepared to die on the way or die because of the disease or because of the pandemic than to starve to death in the urban centers. So what are these sustainable cities we are talking about? And I remember a caution in one of the leading newspapers being published, and one of the migrant workers said that we will live with salt and roti, roti, I mean, the native bread that we call roti, but will not come back to the cities. So what is this that has happened? So I think the pandemic has exposed the hollowness of the way we have built our cities, the way and the structures that we have actually developed over the last, I would put it, say, last 30 years or 35 years. And the pandemic actually completely exposed those structures. They said, I mean, we may build jargons and jargons. We may, I mean, fill all our texts with the kind of the niceties and the words that we have in our dictionary about inclusiveness, about pro-people growth, but actually this growth is not inclusive development that we have witnessed. And that's why you'll find many people in the initial stages died on the way back home than due to COVID, but they were not prepared. And we have very fascinating data from the CMI at that time. Of course, one of the data spoke about the large unemployment that got created in the cities, which was around 27%, 28%, which is like unimaginable. But at the same time, something which really jittered and which has not really come down is the labor participation rate. I mean, the willingness of the worker to work in the cities. I mean, that's something very important. One of the key, it doesn't mean that they will not come back. They have to come back because actually the genesis of their migration is not, I mean that still exists. I mean, what I call distress migration, that still exists in the countryside, but not to go into those details right now. I think that labor participation rate, according to CMI, fell from almost 72% to 38%, which meant that out of 100 people who have the capacity to work in the urban centers, just 38% said we are willing to work. 62% said we are not willing to work in the urban centers. So what are these urban centers actually? What is it that we have created? I think there is, and that is what we really have to highlight. I mean, we just cannot shed away that reality. And that reality still exists because that labor participation rate has not really gone up phenomenally high. Of course, people are coming back because, as I told you, distress migration is one of the propellers for migration to take place from the countryside to the urban centers. But that fear still haunts our migrant people. I mean, that's not going to end. That's just one part I would like to in the beginning. The second element, I think, what is important is, as you have rightly mentioned, I think the figures are also, because in 2021 we'll have a better picture of how urban we are, but we do not generally consider our non-census towns. So if we consider somewhere around 4,500 non-census towns, the census towns, the statutory and the non-statutory towns, I think then we are almost 38% to 40% urban in the country. And of course, as you mentioned, peri-urban, what's the status of peri-urban? It's more urban than rural. So I think it's a large agglomeration of people living in urban centers. At the same time, we also ought to know that the urban comprise almost 67, 68% the GDP of the country, but 90% of the government revenue. This is what urban is. But is it getting back? I mean, what we spoke about inclusive development. Have we built up our redistributive policies so that we go back to ensure that some kind of equitable distribution takes place or some kind of equitable development takes place? I think the answer is a big no. Now, why is it so? Why is it so? So just let me just jump to those important, three important. But please, Dr. Soumyadip, just guard me, because you're talking to a politician, and never allow a politician to use the mic, because then the politician can go endless. And since you come from Bengal, I don't have to tell you anything about that. So please let me, because I'm just building. I'm that environment, and once I go in the flow, then I probably. So please guard me to that. So I think one of the reasons, the important reasons, there are many reasons, of course. There are reasons for governance, the structure of governance. But let me go to the basics. And the basics happens to be, and that's what we built in the last 3.5 or 4 decades, is this paradigm shift in the character of the cities. How do we view cities? We have viewed cities more of what we earlier considered to be managers, city to be managers, shifting this role from city managers to city entrepreneurs. All these buzzwords that we have heard from the JNNURM reforms, and then finally to the smart cities. I'll of course come to the smart cities. Actually treat cities more like entrepreneurs, competitive cities. Shanghai competing with Mumbai, and Pune competing with Bremen in Germany. I mean, what is the fuss all about? I mean, how can you have a competitive city between Shimla, which is one of the oldest municipalities, dates back to 1851, and a town, say, which is of the same population? So, what we try to build is that, hey, if you have to run your city, government will be in a withdrawal state. That's one of the important policy provisions that happen. And you have to attract investment. So the cities have to become centers to attract investment. And, to attract investment, you have to change n number of laws. You have to make investment friendly. You have to reduce your fiscal deficit, blah, blah, what not. So not realizing that 90% of our city governments are even unable to pay the salaries. I mean, the tax structure is so centralized. Now even your provincial governments are becoming municipalities. What to talk about a municipal government? So you know what I'm trying to build. So this whole shift of from city managers to city entrepreneurs, and at the same time, I think there's another element which is very essential for, and I need to place it over here, is this. When I said withdrawal of the state, I think it is also important to understand some of the important, what in political economy, I mean, it's a jargon. I never wanted to bring it here, but what we used to call use value actually transformed into exchange value. Now it's a complex thing. In simpler terms, it means commoditization of certain essential elements that are very essential for the society. Now, take for example, this is what I've been quoting everywhere: is water a right or is water a need? Now, if water is and people would say it's both, it's right as well as a need. No, it's not. It can't be both, because if it is a right, then a right to the individual accrues certain demands to the state, vis-a-vis the state. That the state is bound to provide water. But if it is a need, then there are n number of players who can come in between, and then they can provide water. So when I say this transformation that took place in the last 30 years, 40 years, some of the utilities that were bound to be run by the city governments or say by the parastatals actually got transformed into private. So it's more of privatization of the cities. And we find humongous amount of capital surplus getting expropriated from the cities. I have all those figures. I mean, we have a very interesting work done by a British professor called Ursula Hughes, who's actually charted this. I don't want to go into that jargon right now, but actually it is humongous. Why I bring this to the fore? Actually, this also led to the basic foundation of the unsustainability in the city, because this actually robbed the assets of the people and created huge kind of inequity that exists in the cities. Take, for example, water. Because I have moved to Delhi. In Delhi, I mean, and just one example, that's what we were able to do in Shimla. Just to make water inclusive, is it not quite essential that your tap water should be potable? And if your tap water is potable, just imagine the amount of money that you save by not shedding that money to your aquaguards, to your all those, and that aquaguard business in Delhi is almost 20,000 crores. So, where does this money come from? So education, water, health, I mean, all these types of, so that the public domain of these utilities actually got squeezed, and these were more privatized, either in a direct form or in an indirect form. which led to huge kind of expropriation of surplus from what I term robbing the poor and making the rich richer. And we have the latest Oxfam report 2019, and I think and I've been quoting it time and again, and it places, if you that report speaks about India. So it places the 10% asset holders at the top and 10% asset holders at the bottom. If that differential is known, if that differential is calculated, it's 500 times in countryside. The asset holder, 10% asset holders at the top and 10% asset holders at the bottom. But in urban India, in the cities, it is 50,000 times. Just imagine what is it that we are building. It's huge gap. How could these migrant people have actually stayed back even for 24 hours? They do not have any asset. There's no asset that they could have held back. So I'm building this. So that's one part. I don't want to go into the details of education, health, the kind of interventions that have happened. Of course, Delhi is a different example, and that's why it also speaks about what needs to be done as far as health is concerned, as far as education is concerned, and also water is concerned. So I think, and that also speaks about the solutions that I would like to talk about in the end. So coming to the next point, who is planning for who? When we say who are building our cities, and when we speak about participatory cities, I think the entire process of building a city is actually negation of the participatory principle of governance. Why I say so? Just imagine, forget about small towns. Small towns do not even have a master plan. But take, for example, Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore. Who are the ones who are planning these cities? Delhi Development Authority. It's a parasite, not answerable to the city government. I'm not even answerable to the provincial government, to the state government. Mumbai Development Authority, not answerable to the Mumbai municipality. Bangalore Development Authority, not answerable to the Bangalore municipality. Then we have the GAMADA, Greater Mohali Area Development Authority in Mohali. So all these development authorities very systematically, because these development authorities are more actually steered by large transnational corporations, consultants who come, hey, you don't know how to run a city. You don't even know how to plan a city. Your city governments have no capacity. So we will plan your cities. And actually, this is a highly exclusive form of development. When I say exclusive form of development, this lays the foundation of gentrification in our cities. So the same Western principle, and when we speak about gentrification in India, we have an additional gentrification that is on the basis of your social stratification, Dalits, non-Dalits, Muslims, that we have witnessed. So I think that and I remember, because when I was part of the National Task Force, I think I need to share that anecdote with you. K.C. Sivaramakrishnan, actually, who brought in the 74th Constitutional Amendment, he was the secretary at that time. He was our chair, we were one of the members, and he very funnily used to tell us, who these consultants are actually who are building your cities. I used to ask, yes, sir. Tikender, don't forget, when you were young parents and you had very young children, so you brought in a maid to rear your children, to take care of your children. Now you have become a grandparent, and still these guys come and say, hey, you don't know how to rear your children. So actually, the kind of structures that we have built, all these development authorities, are they answerable to the elected, or are they even elected for that matter? They are A, they're not elected. B, they're not answerable. C, they have no responsibility as far as the entire urban governance is concerned. I could have imagined that, look, DDA is building a city and at the same time also running a city. No, that doesn't happen. So that is quite an exclusive principle. The second happens to be, even when you have certain plans being made or drawn with the assistance of the city government, then who is running these cities? We have a very interesting study done by, I don't know whether IMPRI was part of it or not, but I remember Praja did a very fascinating study. We have the 74th Constitutional Amendment, and according to that amendment, according to the 12th schedule, 18 subjects were supposed to be transferred to the city governments. When we say 18 subjects, water distribution, a number of things, city planning, city development, all those things are actually part and parcel since 1994, when we had this 74th Constitutional Amendment. But it's horrible. It's not even funny now to really place that report, that of all these functions, 2 functions are universally accepted in this, not accepted, but actually entrusted the city governments. A, when you and I, we are born, we get the birth and the death certificate from there. And B, the solid waste management happens to be the city government. Rest all the functions, either you have 5 functions or 6 functions. Mumbai city government has, I think, 12 functions, despite the fact that they have plenty of money. So you are in a situation actually where the parastatals are running your city. So, the kind of alienation that I was talking about, where is the participatory form of city development? So I think that is also something very important for us to understand. Now, coming back to the basic principle, I think if this is the way how we are building our cities, then A, it's highly exclusive. B, the kind of economic policy paradigm that we are building, it is not inclusive at all. It speaks more about competitive cities. And C, actually the elected government, and actually we do not have to restrict to the elected government. We have to go further deep down. I mean, if you present in democracy, what about ward sabhas? What about ward committees? I mean, if we have to speak about participatory governance, so the essential thing has to be, how do we build our cities? And that's what I remember in Quito, when John Kloss, the then executive director of Habitat 3, screamingly kept on saying that, hey, if you need to make your cities sustainable, then you have to go back to the basics. And when he said go back to the basics, meant go back to the basics of planning. This whole business of laissez-faire, that free competitive things going to happen, and then that's how your cities are going to be competitive and develop. This is not going to sustain. And something very funny has happened. I don't know whether we have some friends from the NIUA, because that's one of the important think tanks that we have in our country. But I was just going through the affordable rental housing scheme. Mark my words, Dr. Soumyadip, I'm telling you here in this webinar, it's not even going to offload, because the entire premise for the affordable housing rental scheme is not the government is going to intervene. It's that some private player is going to come, and the private player is going to construct houses for the poor, for the migrant in the cities, and then those houses would be then taken on rent by the migrant. Who the hell is going to come? I mean, if I have the capital, I will never come for that. Where I know, what would be the gestation period? When I'm going to get my grant back? So I think this whole issue of planning has to be revisited. And when I say planning has to be revisited, we have to give this planning bulwark back to the city governments. I can understand some of them do not have the capacity, but they build their capacity. That's one of the fundamental things I wanted to place. If we have to make the entire city development process to be inclusive. And I think with this, I think I also need to stretch it to the way how the urban commons have been usurped. Because all these policy paradigm that has happened in the previous years has actually, why it is that it has actually robbed the poor? For the simple reason, because whatever was urban common, take for example, Gorakhpur, a town like Gorakhpur, where you had some 80 to 85 water bodies. Now I think you're left with just 20 water bodies. The rest, all the water bodies have been actually taken over by the real estate. So you have a big, large housing complex. And I just finished reading a book by Samuel Stein called The Capital City, the Real Estate State. Of course, it speaks about how Trump came into being and how actually Trump really amassed wealth being a real estate agent in US. But I think there were similar parallels that we can draw. How actually this policy intervention shapes the scope for the real estate to really occupy some of the important spaces. So this is what we have seen in Gorakhpur. This is what we have witnessed in Gurgaon. And when I say Gurgaon, I mean, this is something very funny that I would like to share. And when I say funny, I think it is important because when I was doing this show on a television channel, I mean, the City Speaks, I mean, Urban Agenda. So we went to shoot in Gurgaon in one of the lakes. And we all know some of it because, how Shah Rukh Khan became Shah Rukh Khan. I mean, Shah Rukh Khan became Shah Rukh Khan because he got that, he's catapulted from that serial called Fauji. So I just purposely went there where that shooting took place in Gurgaon, in one of the lakes, and where I was told that he literally drowned. I found there is no lake left. It's a real estate building hub now. That's what we have transformed, you know. So that is not a sustainable model. And now coming back to I mean this entire consultant driven stuff, I think if we do not give that provision of planning back to the people, to the elected governments, then actually these models can take. I'll just cite two important examples. Then I would like to end up. Then probably we'll have questions. I think I've exceeded my time as well. The first thing happens to be about, solid waste is a universal problem across the cities. Now you'll see, even in Swachh-Bharat Mission, you'll find city sanitation plans being drawn by consultants who come from large transnational corporations. And they say, hey, you do not know even how to plan your city sanitation. The plan, you don't know how to plan it. So we'll prepare your plan. And if you are not cautious enough, then you'll find that a clause has been embedded for a waste to energy plant. Majority of these towns are now going for a waste to energy plant. Somebody tell me one city where a waste to energy plant is working, is functioning. So when I say consult driven, these solutions are for large capital intensive technology drawn solutions. Do we require that or not? I think that is important. And since these plans have been made in such a fashion that then these consultants say, okay, we'll get you investment. Why do you worry? So since you do not have the money, the poor city government says, okay, you draw the plan, you get the investment, and we'll see that. And actually 10 years down the line, we know the condition of what is happening. Instead, we could have gone for easy, democratic, decentralized solutions, which are abysmally low price. I mean, we don't have to go for those large capital intensive technologies. Number two is the mobility thing. Why is it that you find that there is so rush for metros everywhere, whereas the metro costs almost 400 crores per kilometer, and if you plan a bus rapid system or a mobility system, whereby and in majority of the cities we found that almost 16% to 17% own cars, the others hardly have cars. So actually, it is more of an encroachment of the middle class on the urban commons. So instead of providing solutions which are cheaper, which are viable, we are actually being pulled for solutions which are capital intensive. So we'll have a metro, we'll have a widening of the roads, we'll have squeezing the pedestrian paths. These are actually unsustainable ones. And on this, I think lastly, Dr. Soumyadip, I would like to build the layer of the smart city. Actually, the entire provision of the smart city. Actually, we thought now with I don't think that we have a single definition for a smart city, but I would say it is more of a data-driven governance model. That look, you have a mobile, you just press a button, you push the lights off, you put your tap off through a button. All that is fine. I have no problems with that smart governance. But the point is, who is owning this governance? We have a report from Bloomberg that states that the Internet of Things is $19 trillion industry. And Forbes say the smart city industry is almost $1.5 trillion. We are $2.5 trillion economy. So just the smart city business is $1.5 trillion. So it's more of privatization and financialization. I don't think that's a problem unless and until it leads to an Orwellian state. But the kind of command centers that are being built, I can understand if the command centers are built and if these centers are built for further expropriation of money and for further expropriation of capital from our citizens to these large transnational corporations, I think then we have to guard ourselves. Take for example the Barcelona city government. They said we'll build our own command center. Take for example what we did in Shimla. Because in Shimla, we didn't allow the large players to dig our city. We said, once you dig the city, please lay two cables, two ducts free of cost for the city government. So, why I'm placing Barcelona, because that's at a macro scale. Why I'm also giving an example of Shimla, because even if you have some right of way, then the city governments can intervene. But provided the city governments must get that advantage to intervene. And if the city governments are mere adjuncts of a provincial government, then actually you'll find all these smart city layers are being taken over by large giants. You have the Googles, you have Cisco's, you have the IBMs taking over all these, and actually all these are not coming free, and all these solutions are moneyed solutions. Now, let me just cite one example to make it clearer. You know, when we were switching over to our water meters, because we have gone for 100% volumetric water distribution in Shimla. Earlier it was average. The hotelier used to pay the same bill what a poor say household guy was paying. So we said we have to finish that. We'll distribute water on volumetric basis. And since there were no meters, so we went for 100% meter replacement. Now there was an option for meter replacement. Now this is where the smartness or the relative smartness comes. So we had a meter which was costing 2,000 rupees, and of course the city government was to bear all the expenses. And we also had a meter which was for 20,000 rupees. Now imagine, Dr. Soumyadip, at 20,000 rupees sitting at your office, you just press the button and you know the reading. Is that a plausible solution? Or 2,000 with RFID tag? I think something what is important is what is the priority. We know we require street lights, we require smart street lights, we require LEDs. But what do you require? A street light which you can put it off and on, or a street light where you just pass by, it will switch on, and when there's nobody, it will put off. But just imagine the kind of price mechanism that is there. So that's just one part as far as small solutions are concerned. But larger picture is who owns these smart solutions. And if the city government is not the largest stakeholder and just a mere supplier of that money chain from its citizens through user charges, then it's a real mix up situation that is going to happen. So that's one. Number two, I think what really pricks me with the smart city solutions and with the smart city tool that has been developed is the whole business of the special purpose vehicle, the SPVs. And I remember KC used to, I have so many anecdotes with KCR. So he used to say, it's just like writing an obituary of the 74th Constitutional Amendment, because, the elected council is nowhere near. So on the one hand, where we are actually focusing on democratic governance, participatory governance, we have an SPV model that gives a damn to the people. And if you see, the pan-city solutions are more for Internet of Things, say some mobility stuff, but the area-based development is limited just to 2% or 3% of the areas. It further increases gentrification. It is further an exclusionary project. These are not going to sustain. We've seen the debate in the Rajya Sabha. It's 14% to 15% offload of the money took place. And actually, when the people don't have money, what do you do in such a situation? Lastly, I think, and that's the last for sure, actually, if you have to sustain, especially your migrant people, what you require is not just housing. Housing is such a key essential element, but you also have to build rental housing. You have to legalize the already existing informal housing that exists in slums, and at the same time, we have to accept the model that Kerala has built, or what Shimla has also. But Shimla, we did not build it. It was there since 100 years ago, where we have labor hostels which run perfectly fine. You just pay 100 rupees a month, or earlier I think it was 50 rupees a month. And actually, these are habitable. These are not slums, by the way. These are labor hostels. Because those people who come from may not want to live. I have that data, but since I do not have the time, actually more than 70% do not want to live in those cities. They just want to come and go back. So what they require is a decent housing. A decent housing can come in the form of rental housing or even labor hostels those who do not migrate along with their families. So while just building it up, I think to me, it's a big problem. It's a big problem because the way we are looking at the cities, still unfortunately, we take cities as entrepreneurs, as engines of growth. Actually, they are not engines of growth. How can we consider them to be engines of growth? So to me, I think cities have to be considered what you rightly point out, livable cities. So what could be the livability index? Why can't we have a decent work city? What we have been witnessing in Seoul, for that matter. And with the diminishing of labor laws, can we just reimagine some kind of relationship building between the workmen and the employer, because they're not going to come back. They really fear coming back for a decent work. And mind you, I mean, just to keep on record, 90% of the people who come to the cities actually do not have a written contract. So how do you enforce even minimal labor laws that are there? And the kind of informalization that has happened in the cities is jumped from 75% in the last 3 decades to almost 92 to 93%. So it's actually a very difficult situation that we are in. And unless and until we have a leapfrog kind of policy intervention, and that has to be very participatory, by the way, of course, with your experts and all. This is not going to sustain, and you'll have another form of reflex coming up. We had a pandemic, but we'll have another form of reflex. And last, Dr. Soumyadip, because I just forgot that, and now it just struck my mind. I think we have to revisit our disaster management plan of action, because we had the PM, we had the CM, and we only had the DM. There was no city mayor. So I think we have to re-provision the Disaster Management Act, because we have only ratified the District Disaster Management Authority. The CDMAs are there, that's the City Disaster Management Authority. The mayor and the council is completely disempowered. There's no power that they have. Actually, they are more of an adjunct of a district administration. And you'll find this reverse migration has taken place from cities. So we have to revisit, even if some small kind of interventions are to be made. I think, thank you. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Panwar, for your insightful and at the same time very provocative lecture, because I think we have some panelists who are actually from the city administration, like who has the experience of this. You actually mentioned about the problem of viewing Indian cities as entrepreneurial cities. You mentioned about the problem and how the typical Indian policy paradigm, urban policy paradigm, views Indian cities as the growth of engine, and it actually competes with making the cities livable in true sense. And you also mentioned about the privatization of urban services. You mentioned about, say, for example, about the importance of right versus need when we are considering about this urban water, for example, urban water supply. So you mentioned about the right and need. And also at the same time, what you mentioned is about our entire cities, the problem with the consultant driven city making process. And there, for example, you mentioned about it actually facilitates the negation of participatory ethos that you mentioned, and also the unaccountable parastatals who are actually taking the lead in planning and our cities, and also the implementation, and it actually leads to, or maybe related to, certain kind of gentrification, which is further accentuated by the socio-economic discrimination that in India that we have. Okay, so well, and also regarding the smart governance, you rightly mentioned, or you rightly questions the aspect like who is owning the smart governance, or for whom actually we are making the city smart. And in fact, personally, I agree with that. The real smartness lies with providing urban basic services. So that is the key thing if we want to make our cities livable as well as sustainable, and to prepare and to make the cities resilient in future. And so I think we have some very interesting questions coming up from the question and answer session. But before going to that question and answer session, I would like to request Mr. Samin Unhale. Mr. Samin Unhale is with us, and since you mentioned much about the problems related to the this consultant-driven urban planning processes, so I request Mr. Samin Unhale, sir. He is the Joint Commissioner, Municipal Administration of Maharashtra, and he was recently the CEO of the Thane Smart Cities, and also the Municipal Commissioner of Ulhasnagar City. So I request Mr. Unhale, if you please comment on what Mr. Panwar has said.
Thank you very much, Saurav. Soumyadip, I'm in office, so I'm with my mask. You know, so
it's not a problem.
Okay. Yeah, there are certain, actually, I think although I was traveling, I was listening to, very insightful analysis of our speaker. and one could make out, the real experience that he has. But I have a different take on that. Maybe because of what I am doing, I really don't think you should see the city space as a zero-sum game with an underlying conspiracy theory. I tend to think that, many a times cities and even the modern things is not a zero-sum game. It's a variable-sum game, number one. In zero-sum game, you will start thinking of, someone is trying to take a larger pie out of it as compared to others, and then an underlying conspiracy to that. I personally think that, as a way of handling this or, engaging with cities, because apart from the things, I have also worked in the Regional Development Authority for almost 4 years. So, I mean, for my experience of, working in all the 4 animals that are in the urban jungle of municipalities, smart city, the Regional Development Authority, and so the state regulating authority that we have. I personally never thought actually, there is any unreasonable poaching of each other's area. I personally feel, if you really look at the evolution of administrative sciences, they talk of structural differentiation and functional specialization as a necessary process for administrative development. In that framework, I personally feel that, these new multiple agencies working and existing in a city space is an inevitability of a very complex system that is evolving. I won't really think, that a single agency can manage any and everything of a very complex cities that we have in India, or for that matter, the global south. Because the interconnectedness is so strong that it will be very difficult to, identify one axis and just try to analyze the entirety of the scene only depending upon that particular axis. So that was my second take, that, it is getting very complex, and therefore we require more collaboration and cooperation and coordination. Even if, in fact, in the case of, even if we take any big city like it might be Delhi or big metros for that matter, to start with, the things are so complex that it will be difficult to, believe that one agency can have entire expertise and deal it in the entirety. No, it is not going to happen. In my view, we will require multiple agencies, and it's nothing wrong in having multiple agencies. My third take was that, the analyzing urban Indian scene, the political axis is not the only sufficient axis to, analyze the entirety. In a sense that the traditionally speaking, there is no science of cities for that matter. I mean, we depend upon various disciplines on what they have studied in cities, and then try to take up from these multiple disciplines and analyze the urban phenomena. So as such, there is no science of cities anywhere. There is no dedicated discipline of cities anywhere. So we are actually, dependent, or we bask in the reflected glory of the other disciplines and other thinkers and what they have mentioned on the cities. So I believe at the third level, we'll be requiring some dedicated, focus on interdisciplinary approach in studying the cities to get the feel of the complexities that we have. Fourthly, which I had said, the political access is not sufficient to explain the entirety of the complex scene we have. So we will not be in a position to understand the scene only on political axis, and the issue of citizen engagement cannot be seen entirely on the basis of political sciences, because I mean somehow the electioneering has dominated the democratic institutions in Indian scene, in cities, and therefore we are unable to get a proper rational, a proper logical, a proper scientific approach for handling the complexity issues. Because what is the election process? You vote once in 5 years, and what do you do the remaining 4 years and 4 years and 11 months there? So the citizen engagements, the community participation has to be, in my view, dealing from the political accountability paradigm that has dominated the discourse for so many years, and as a reason I feel which is not That's the reason why we're not having the total picture of this complex Indian city. So political analysis, yes, it is required, but beyond a limit, it is insufficient. And that is precisely happening in the framework of whether you're going to politically run the city or administer the city or manage the city. That's the reason you find different words, that are making you require city managers, or you require, the mayor is extremely powerful in other countries. In fact, for that matter, American mayor is, he's like the viceroy of the Indian city, of those cities. He has the entire power with his India, the mayor is outside. In Indian scene, we are having different state governments following different frameworks in that. That is briefly which I wanted to know. I personally feel that what solves the problems of the people has to be given priority, irrespective of the discipline or irrespective of the analysis that we might run into. People have their problems to be solved, and we must take all efforts to solve the problems. That was my, I think I can't continue on long. I think there are other speakers also. That was briefly, that's what I wanted to share with you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Unaleza. It's really nice, like you rightly mentioned about especially these 4 animals in urban jungle. So that phrase is really interesting, and it is really the difficult task is to institute a collaborative governance framework so that the cities can be managed in some meaningful way. And also you raise some valuable question regarding the accountability. So, for example, when Mr. Panwar was talking about, he was actually questioning about the accountability of the city managers, and being a commissioner and being a city manager of sort of city managers, you are also raising some problems about the accountability question. So we have certain other questions also. Very interesting comment. But before that, I just request Mr. Panwar to have his comment on what Mr. Unaleza is saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Could I also rephrase some of the questions so that simultaneously you take them?
Okay, fine. Yes.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Just 1-2 minutes. Really, when sir, a very good occasion, since we also have the points from the municipal administration, and sir has been in different realm of governance, rightly. One thing, sir, I really I'm thankful, and sir, I wanted you again to touch that in terms of water governance, what you have done during your tenure, again for the sake of audience, and how that you have done. If you can, you touched upon it, but I think more for what that was a very good example. Other point, I really accountability, responsibility, parastatal. In my view, as Samir sir is also saying that okay, we have DDA, but who is appointing the elected officials of DDA? Again, the political class, in some sense, be it this party or that party. And even in city, we have municipal commissioner, bureaucrat, again, elected leaders only get them, and sir is rightly saying that we are creating these special purpose vehicles or this board or this thing because of administrative reasons. And really, the rationale behind it is really true. But as we are also experiencing the purpose, sir also raised this, that NIUA had done these studies. Many of this DPR and SCP Smart City Plan all comes to the NIUA. That is also public document. We have done many studies, evaluating. Then in terms of cities, we also see that how strong the proposal is and what is going to happen. Perhaps we can discuss it some other time. But even the purpose is getting questioned now. Because if I'll talk about the policies which we have, smart cities mission, Amrut, Swachh Bharat mission, Deen Dayal Upadhyay NULM, Hriday, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, so many urban push that in fact the government of India is saying that it is urban renaissance. And but it's not to the tune of any place near to what China is doing. They are spending more than 6 lakh to 8 lakh crores per annum. We have not been able to spend 3-4 lakh crores in our last 5 years in our urban programs. Something called National Infrastructure Pipeline have come, where we are trying to spend 103 lakh crores or 1 crore. Many things also coming like that. But then if these administrative things or these new bodies are not solving the purpose, then what the complaint these new parastatals have, that they do not have the teeth. And mayors also are not powerful. So how can mayors be made powerful or that will lead me also for Samir sir and Panwar sir, you to reflect upon that what should be the source of revenue or funds for the city governments given this case? Should it be the property tax? Should it be municipal bond? Should it be the user fee? Or how should city enforce its ways and means to be Atmanirbhar, I would say, and not depend on other thing. In fact, in Delhi, the district commissioner office is levying 500 rupees penalty if you're not wearing the mask. So even for a city, it is very difficult to enforce such kind of rules, and there is so much of really a very complex jungle. I would quickly go to, in fact, a few more questions also, which is coming that Tikender sir really raised on migration issue, that roti namak khayenge, wapas nahi aayenge. So why this hate and this exclusion? And this is growing in terms of, you know, also violence, you know, not woman friendly. Why this hate is increasing, and what can city leaders like you and Samir sir can do to bridge that gap, especially when, you know, competition and this pandemic thing is really coming upon. And yes, this much for now, I think. And we have more questions from Dr. Simi Mehta and Dr. Kakasha. We will come by your next round. Right, please. Over to you. Yes.
So shall I respond?
Yes,
Yes, yes, please. Please.
Okay,
please.
thanks. Dr. Samir? Okay.
Yes,
So,
please.
yeah, I think what Mr. Samir was saying, he has his own experience, and I think it's out of his experience. We have commonalities, but we have differences, and I think that's the beauty of democracy, and that's what we need to profess as well. But, you know, the commonality is, I 100% agree that city is a very complex. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So definitely there is complexities, there are interdisciplinaries. The point is, what is the best option? I mean, the best option can't be just utopian. It has to be through your practical experiences. And let me cite Shimla once again, because I have got this opportunity to serve the city for 5 years, and I was a directly elected deputy mayor. So I always term, in Shimla, I have always been saying that Shimla is a classic case of reverse metamorphosis of urbanization, of urban governance. Now that's what Mr. Samir has to actually listen and understand. Why I still argue very strongly for the greater interdisciplinary and greater accountability of the system. When I say reverse metamorphosis, not that I'm very fond of what the Britishers did, but you know, they created those structures of urban governance. As I told you, Shimla is one of the oldest municipality of the country, dates back to 1851. I mean, that means it was created by the Britishers. And we remember, I mean, that's what we boastfully used to say, that at one point of time, we've given a loan. The Shimla municipality has given a loan of 50,000 rupees to Mumbai Municipal Corporation, Bombay at that time, and which has never been returned. Yeah. So that's a separate issue. The point is, actually, why I say reverse metamorphosis? Because if you see the basic models, otherwise, why should you have an urban governance model? I mean, why should you have a city governance model? Because that is how we have evolved over a period of time. If not political, then what? I mean, if it is not political, then what? I mean, could it be I mean, I can discuss that as well. I'm not in opposition to that. I mean, if not political, then what? But we have seen, if not political, because it is hardly political, it is more being run by administrators or more being run by. Now, as Mr. Smith has rightly pointed out, actually urban development happens to be a state subject. For example, in West Bengal, we have a model of mayor and council, where a mayor and council works like a cabinet, as you know, Dr. Soumyadip. So a little better placed as far as urban governance is concerned. Similarly, Madhya Pradesh has a mayor and council model. Haryana, you'll be surprised that the commissioner has the ability and the power to recommend dissolution of the municipal corporation. So you can understand. I mean, so the point is actually, which many of our friends may not agree. Actually, the point is to look city as an entrepreneur model, and who is the best customer. I mean, I still go back to my basic understanding, and that happens to be, not to say it's a conspiracy theory, but it's a more of the term that I never wanted to use, the neoliberal paradigm of urban governance. Because taking cities to be so more of a withdrawal of the state, and it started not now, it started long back. Even when we had this when we had the 74th constitutional amendment, that cities must create its own space for economic development. The state would kind of withdraw. And I would again reiterate all that Ursula Hughes has written, especially giving the figures of UNCTAD, whereby the largest transnational corporations have shifted their portfolios from finance to actually a service sector. So let us not understand it in that naive form that, look, it's very sober. No, it's not like that. Actually, there is a game plan. And the game plan we have seen, because since we are recording the show, I don't want to go into those details, but I know the intricacies when these smart cities were getting unfolded. The whole vision, who all were there behind it? The consultants, even the larger nations who said, take money from us, we'll develop your smart cities. So to understand it, that look, it's a very linear thing that is happening. It's not like that. But yes, profoundly speaking, actually, it's a complex, and in that complexity, how can we intervene? And what is best? And I agree. What is best for the people? And I think best for the people, as has been pointed out, I am not a great votary of, you get elected first past post the system, and then 5 years you get a ward reserve, and then no, this one. That's why I tried to develop that. According to me, I think the provision for more participatory governance could be when we hold those ward sabhas, and those ward sabhas which should take place. Let those ward sabhas create those plans. No, let that qualitative and quantitative analysis take place. What in scientific vision. Scientific terminology that we speak about, and then let us build that instead of superimposing a plan from the top. Why I'm so obfuscatingly offended to use these terms? Because I've seen, in Shimla, city sanitation plan, city mobility plan. You name, there's hazard risk vulnerability assessment plan. There are n number of plans, and all these plans have been driven by large consultants. And actually, if you see, 2 years, 3 years down the line, most of these plans are licking the dustbins. Nobody even takes care because they were not owned by the people. The people never owned those plans. So how do you make people, after all, city belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to the infrastructure. The city belongs to the people. So I think, I again reiterate that. Let us try that. Let us experiment that. If we fail, okay, fine. 10 years, 15 years down the line, I think we can again think over it. Definitely it's complex, but given that complexity and given, that's why I said the reverse metamorphosis of urban governance that we witnessed in Shimla from the British to the present era, I think I again reiterate that we have no other option but to make it more participatory. And more participatory, not just through the institution of the elections, that's just one, but also to ensure that we have, and ward sabha, ward committees could be one model, there could be many other models, like Delhi was planning some neighborhood committees. That's how, so that the people own, even if they do not agree, at least their participation should be there. And let me also tell you that the biggest hindrance for this people's participatory planning process is going to come not from the bureaucrats, it's going to come from the councillors, elected councillors. We tried it and we witnessed it in Shimla. Why? Because you are taking the domain of the elected councillor and giving it to the people, which is a seriously challenging situation. So I agree with Mr. Samir on that count. But what is the other option? And we have seen, over the period of time. And just to clinch that, I think we also need to think of the permanent cadre for the municipal services. For the simple reason, we train an officer for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the line. All of a sudden, our provincial government change. There's a change in the provincial government, and the best officers are then picked up from the city administration and transferred to district administration. I think we really have to rethink. Now, how to make, so I'm just jumping from there to what could be the sources of revenue. I don't mind levying property tax and all that. That is essential, but that cannot suffice. And this is what KCR and we were discussing when we were reviewing the 74th Constitutional Amendment. I think it is high time at least we start discussing. If we have to think in the larger context of, say, 2030, 2040, we're going to be 50% urbanized, then I think we have to actually lay our hands on the income tax. Massive flow of income tax takes place. And just for argument's sake, we try to understand what is the tax that Shimla city contributes. It was almost 2,500 crores in the form of income tax and other taxes. And what it gets back, not even 100 crores or 150 crores as far as the finance commissions are concerned, both the central and the state finance commission. Look at the Scandinavian countries, because actually we are also in an evolutionary phase. I agree with that. I mean, we are no authority on that. So in that evolutionary phase, I think let us also understand that some part of the income tax must be shed back to the cities, because they are the largest contributors of the income tax. Scandinavian countries, I mean, I think the municipal committees get almost 30% of the income tax that gets generated. Maybe if we get 5% to 10%, just imagine the kind of capacity that you'll have within the city government, instead of relying on your multilateral institutions. And I remember Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, when he was the urban development minister. I mean, that's very funny. I just got into my mind. And he said, look, your city governments don't have the money, so they go to the state governments. So your state governments also don't have the money, large fiscal deficit. Where is the money? Take, for example, Himachal is almost 60,000 crores deficit. So they come to the central government. The central government also doesn't have the money, so they go to the multilateral institutions. And then the multilateral institutions provide you money with A grant, B grant, the kind of money gets doled out for your mobility plans. Can such models be unsustainable? Can such models be sustainable? I think that is what we have to think, discuss in the larger context. So yes, income tax could be one, at least start discussing. Maybe we won't get it because, we are more of a central state now. I mean, the provincial governments are not getting GST dues. What to talk about getting income tax to the city governments? But yes, if we have to sustain this model of urban governance, so A, we have to make them financially empowered. B, we have to make them accountable. And from there, I actually switch over to what the water model is, and why I'm so keen to actually bring in this interdisciplinary approach and also giving the accountable model. And it's a short story which I think I need to share, and also it evolved from that all principle that what I tried to build earlier. That why can't we get potable water from the taps? I mean, is it not a nexus? I mean, you see, you go by the Municipal Corporation Acts of Mumbai, you go by Shimla Municipal. Every act, it's the responsibility of the municipality to provide potable water. Potable means drink. It should be worth drinking. So if it should be worth drinking, we go to Europe. We drink water from their taps. We hardly buy bottles. So if we could create such structures there in Europe, or for that matter in Singapore, why can't we create such structures here in India? I think that's one of the essential things. So in Shimla, what used to happen is, because of the duality in the administration, the water was being supplied by a parastatal, that's the state government, the irrigation public health, and being distributed by the Shimla Municipal Corporation. Not like what we had in the British time. It was one single administration. And then all of a sudden, what happened is that in 2005, some of our very good engineers in the state government parastatal, they constructed a sewerage treatment plant 5 kilometers upstream of water treatment plant. And because of that, every alternate year, we had an outbreak of hepatitis in Shimla. Every year, 2007, 2009, 2011, 2013. And once it happened when we were in office. And then when we went to the root of the system, the government said, hey, you have no business to come to us because we are a responsible agency. We are providing you with potable water. Then we had to involve and engage the NIV, National Institute of Virology, who were able to go into decoding the genome of the virus. They said, look, the virus that is there in the sewerage, in the blood samples and water samples has the same genome. So then we went back to the government, either you take the entire system or you give it to us. There has to be some account. Of course, I also registered an FIR. 6 officers were behind the bars for almost 6 months. They never got bail because it was criminal negligence on their part. But we started building a block by block, in the sense the government said, you take the system. So we started building and what we call resilience. And of course, why I say nexus, because it is quite inherent in the system. 50% was non-revenue water, which was getting wasted because the cost of the capital cost was lesser than the operation cost, because that nexus existed. broke all that nexus, and then we were able to reduce this NRW to almost to 5 to 10% because we were able to check the leakages. We were able to check also the sewerage problem that had. The beauty is, I mean, what I want to mention is that since 2016, when we created this single utility called the Greater Shimla Water Supply Circle, now it's called the Shimla Jal Nigam, which we never wanted it to be a company because it was World Bank funded. Till we were there, we never allowed it to be a company. We wanted fair amount of autonomy, but of course interdisciplinary. Not a single case of hepatitis has been reported. That's the beauty, you know. Now I mean, I take the owner's responsibility. I'm out of the system since last 3 years. That you drink water from the tap, it is portable. You don't have to buy, you know, these fancy ROs where Hema Malini comes and says all that stuff. So you don't have. I mean, just imagine the kind of cost benefit you give back to the people. Huh? Otherwise, you force them to buy these ROs. So why it is so important? Because now who owns this system? I think that is important. If we don't give it back to the people, in the sense, if we don't create those interventions, this is what exactly we are witnessing in Leh. I mean, if we don't bring the people to the fore, in the sense, if there's no people's participation, because in Leh, you know, we get water from gravity. We can, I mean, but instead of getting water from gravity, which would cost not more than say 7 or 8 crores, the PHE engineers would be constructing a water scheme which would be costing somewhere 100 crores, because it's again a consultant-driven scheme, and which eventually would lay large operation and maintenance costs. So is it not a nexus then what it is? I mean, and of course, you may be able to break it somewhere, but not everywhere. So how do you break this nexus, Dr. Soumyadip? I think we break this nexus by creating structures whereby we make them more answerable, we make them more transparent, we make them more accountable. And that's the beauty that we have in Shimla. Of course, there are many other problems that have creeped in, because now it's a Shimla Jal Nigam because of some price differential that has gotten. But at the same time, not a single case of hepatitis has been reported since then. So that's the beauty. And you can drink water from the tap. I mean, the tourists that come, they don't, I mean, there's hardly any RO. They just go and drink water from the tap that are there. So I think that's important. And now this third thing, I think, what I could understand is the accountability of the and the question of inclusion. Why, you know, throughout the world, let me tell you, migration has been, I mean, all these cities have been built by migrants all throughout the world. I mean, so it's and if we and in the modern sense, I mean, what is my problem with those who argue that, look, the political governance model has failed? I tell them, look, this is the modern form of you know, citizenry. I mean, it's a relationship. Not even citizenry. I mean, Barcelona was even able to challenge residents. I mean, even if you're not a citizen, but you're a resident, so you accrue some right. But you know, the kind of model that is being entrusted upon us is more of that Raja Praja. You know, you have a ruler and you are ruled. So the ruler is so benevolent. It is through the ruler's benevolence that you survive. So, hey, come on, give me a break. I mean, we've been more than 70 years of independence. I think so. So more of the citizen-centric, if governance structures we have to create, it cannot be but more participatory. And only if it is participatory, in the sense, if we create those structures, I do not know what form would it take, but n number of structures and n number of variations in different forms of the country, which would eventually take, for example, Shimla. Shimla, we didn't create the structure. Of course, it was created by the Britishers, but they had their own. For example, we have the Kashmiri porters. Despite all this, the Kashmiri porters still come because they have their labor hospitals. Take, for example, Kerala. I mean, Kerala is a new model. Why we just underestimate what Kerala has been able to do? Not just that they have been able to build the labor hostels, but also schools linked to that, you know, where they are able, where they teach in their native languages. And it's more than 1 lakh new houses being constructed for labor, for the migrant labor. So I think that is what we have to keep in mind. I can't bring in the Seoul model here because Seoul is altogether different, which speaks for decent work. There's a charter. I mean, cities have to sign a charter, but at least we can debate, no? We can discuss. And that discussion and debate has to be multi-stakeholders. I mean, it has to be with political people, it has to be, But just to leave it that, look, economic driving force, only if you have large investments, build those flyovers, build those rapid metros and all, that is going to sustain I am the last person to believe that that's going to sustain. To make the city inclusive, we have to, and then n number of interventions that we need to do. And why I'm so against this SPV model. And by the way, I don't know how many of you know, despite the fact that I'm not very fond of smart city, but I'm the one who fought a petition in the High Court, and the smart cities were stayed for almost 6 months because we were cheated and another city was brought in. We said, hey, this is cheating. You have to get us in. And then the High Court intervened. That's how Shimla. So Shimla was not the first city it desired to be, just because of that. And then that's how we created the smart. And by the way, Shimla's smart city plan is quite inclusive in the sense that we actually went down to the people. And according to us, water, because that is the time when we were facing the water crisis, hepatitis, we thought water should be priority number one, but people said, no, it is mobility that has to be priority number one. So we just brought in those, but quite fair. Despite that, I would suggest that the SPV model, just to think that some infrastructure development would actually they were supposed to be lighthouses of development. And politically speaking, the government wanted to show, hey, look, this is what we've done, what has not happened in 70 years. We were able to do in 70 months or whatever. So, but this is not taken off. Actually, there's hardly any responsibility. So, and at the same time, because the model is such that 50% comes from the central government, 50% from the city government or the provincial government. But take, for example, a city like Dharamsala that has a budget of not more than 10 crores and has a smart city plan of 1,000 crores. What's going to happen? I can understand Pune, I can understand IMPRI Chinchwad, or I can understand Mumbai. But that still encroaches on the ability of the city council. So I think, that's all.
Thank you. I think we have some questions, but you have touched almost all the aspects. For example, related to this multi-level government agencies which are responsible for city plan, and also some aspects, not directly, but definitely urban citizenship. Some questions were there. Let me now go to Dr. Simi Mehta, who is the CEO of IMPRI. So she has a question. I think I now request Dr. Mehta to place us.
Thank you very much, sir. I hope I am audible. Actually, I am also traveling, and just like Samir sir, I am in one of the government offices in Jharkhand. It is from the Department of WCD in the ICTS block. So actually, when this is also a smart city, Ranchi is a smart city. But when we see that the problems that are facing the Indian cities, which Mr. Panwar has spoken so eloquently, and these are so evident, and it has been repeatedly expressed in discussion platforms, like webinars, conferences, and even in the policy dialogues, and also in the government documents. First is the problems that are mentioned. But this has been so repeated that it has led to an expectation fatigue, among the people, because I'm talking from the point of view of the beneficiaries, and it has established a status quo that progress is a far-fetched dream and nothing will be possible. You have on the one hand experts like and practitioners like Mr. Sameer Unhale and Mr. Panwar himself, who have done a lot for for changing the status of the cities into good cities, or perhaps smart cities, with all the necessary benefits and all the necessary progress that is required. But my question to Mr. Panwar is, how does the government regain the trust and actually function effectively? And where does the problem or the problems lie, and how can they be resolved? Because enough has been said, enough has been spoken and promised, but where do we start, and when do we start seeing a change? This is my question. Thank you very much, sir, for your very eloquent presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. So, Dr. Soumyadip, shall I?
Yes, please.
Well, I don't think I have answers to your question, frankly speaking. I mean, that would be that would be wrong on my part if I say, but yes, take for example, if you have, if there's a connection between a directly elected mayor and, so I would recommend a directly elected mayor. Because how did we get this ability to really champion the rights or fight even our provincial government? And by the way, politically speaking, let me tell you, we were politically quite different to our provincial government. Despite that, we got a lot that we had to. And we had to challenge our provincial government 4 petitions. We had to file in the High Court, 2 we won and 2 we lost. So I think this direct election gives another additional advantage to the city government structure, in the sense that maybe it could be it could boomerang later. But since my personal experience, contributes that. The directly elected representative has not a greater ability, but a greater push. The representative doesn't just represent a ward, but represents a city. So that's one of the interventions that we can make. Number 2, I think what is also important is why I go back to this whole question of participatory governance, for the simple reason that actually, if you are able to build even small structures of participatory governance, take for example this institution that we have created now, the water institution, which was the Greater Shimla Water Supply Circle, and now it's the Shimla Jal Nigam. With the change in the municipal corporation political governance and also in the provincial governance, that's the state government, and I can share this with you that the new minister wanted to dismantle this structure because of course, interest. There were 1,000 crores lying in it. We got a grant from the World Bank. So, and of course, there were monetary interests. But since we have created this structure, the structure continues. So I think building those structures and institutions is another intervention that we can, small intervention that we can talk about. If you're able to create those institutions and interventions with the participation of the people, with the engagement of the people, then people ultimately own it, and then it is difficult to dismantle. When would they rust in times to come? I cannot say, but yes, they actually sustain for a particular period. At the macro level, I think we need a completely different paradigm of urban governance and of urban reforms that are required. Of course, we require urban reforms, but I don't think that we should delve into that right now. And but some of the basics that has to happen as far as the, I think we have to bring in the whole question of planning, bring the whole question of state back into question, into focus. I mean, that withdrawal of the state from many of the interventions, according to me, is I think an important lesson that we need to learn. And at the same time, even if we take, for example, even if you have institutions, multilateral or even institutions with parastatal, where is the accountability? Now tell me, if you are able to build that accountability, then again that accountability has to come with the participation of the people. I move on a road, I can see that there is a pothole. Why can't the engineer see that there is a pothole? I mean, it's as simple as that. Come on, I mean, it's not a rocket science that we are doing. I mean, it's not a rocket science at all. So I think even those small things that that we have to do in the cities, so that accountability has to be fixed. And of course, I think beyond that, I don't think that I have answers to that, because as Samir had pointed out, actually, urbanization is a state subject, and definitely it has to be more of a dialogue-oriented direction than kind of superimposing that is happening. And the last that has happened is, I mean, which is really blatant, is what I saw just yesterday. The urban reforms for this. Now it's not a state, Jammu Kashmir. I mean, imagine. I mean, who is deciding property tax for Jammu Kashmir cities? Is the Ministry of Home Affairs. And what business has the Ministry of Home Affairs to do with deciding the value of? So who will own it? Mind my words. I mean, where you do not have elections taken. So there we are speaking about ward sabhas. It's a very funny document if you go to the Gazetteer. I just saw that Gazetteer. That's not going to sustain. I mean, so yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you for your response, Mr. Panwar. And one thing what I understand from your discussion is that our understanding of this entire urban planning is still inadequate.
Yes, absolutely.
So we need to learn properly how to manage a city. So
Can I, Dr. Sam, can I just intervene here?
Yes, please.
I am so, I'm reiterating it time and again. And I remember one of the finest urban planners that we have in our country, Professor Romy Khosla. So he has an idea, and it just struck my mind that, so where do we get our planners? And let me also share the anecdote. In Himachal Pradesh, one of my town planner woman was shot dead by a hotelier because that woman didn't have the capacity, because she was managing, I think, 3 districts. I mean, it was impossible for her to ensure that, look, the violations have not taken place. And then the Supreme Court intervened in Kasauli. There's a Kasauli hill in Himachal Pradesh. And because of the violations, she was forced by the Supreme Court to go there and check the construction. The hotelier shot her dead. So why I'm bringing this to the fore, we hardly have planners, especially the small towns. So who is planning? Actually, there's nobody planning. So people plan themselves. They go and first create their houses, then the infrastructure starts coming in. So the Romy Khosla has an interesting idea that those who pass out as planners, graduate as planners, must get a cooling period of 2 years before they jump to their masters, like we have in the MBBS. So from MBBS, if you do your post-graduation, and then these urban planners who are very young must be given money. I mean, it shouldn't be free. I mean, maybe some stipend which should be adequate enough. And these people at least should be allowed to go back to these small towns. Not allowed, but I mean, they should be promoted to go to these towns and at least create their urban plans. We do not even know what is the land use of a town. I mean, even for Shimla, we don't have a master plan as yet. We still have an interim development plan. So unless so there we require those experts, and of course that has to be done once again in a participatory manner. So at least JNNURM did some bit of effort to that, creating those city development plans. And then, of course, those plans have to be owned by the city governments or by the people there. But at least we'll be able to create. I'm sure that out of those 5,000 cities that we are talking about, small and large towns, I don't think more than 500 or 600 have plans. Imagine 4,500 towns are running without plans. What do you expect in urban India? So at least if they go back, they will be able to create those plans. They know the art of planning.
Should I?
Yes, please.
We also have some question and answer which have come.
Please.
I will just read them out. Also, some have come on Facebook. But sir, again, to few things we have exceeded out of the time, but doesn't matter. In fact, this has been a very candid conversation. We would also request Dr. Soumyadip to come in as and when he likes. A few things really I wanted to discuss. One was that how are our cities looking at pollution now? Will that be business as usual? Really, sir, you have highlighted the water and solid waste issue, but also in terms of air pollution, as we are getting into the winters, it's also many studies coming, scientific studies coming that with pollution, COVID cases can rise. And our cities are one of the most dirtiest. In fact, all the reports which come and how serious we are. I remember last year we had we had American delegates and delegates from all over the world. And our minister also saying that it's just a matter of 1-2 years and it will be all, good. And it's a seasonal thing and many meetings have done. How serious we are, especially pertaining to this air pollution, something which is this new centuries phenomena. Other than that, sir, I would again really go to this question that how funds can be mobilized in your view? What should we do? Should we become more aggressive? In US, they take the property taxes very seriously. And I would also come to the part of city budget. So most of the city, the budget is 2,000 crore, 4,000 crore. Dr. Soumyadip has led cities which has, outlay of 4,000 crores. And then also, then what do you do with municipal bonds, or how do you do that, what is happening to the city budget phenomena, and how you see that increasing, and from which all sources, even if so, and would it will be the part of the new infrastructure plan where the city will take the responsibility, of course with the help of all the MNCs consultant which we have. And then, sir, yes, during this pandemic, sir, you really raised this question of command control center. In fact, after 3-4 months, I think more than half of the smart city, myself and Soumyadip sir has also written about it, the command and control center being used for COVID management. But sir, this smart cities mission have so many of new things. Smart cities observatory here in New Delhi, ease of living index, something which came then did not came, ease of doing business. Then we have national urban data stack, national urban policy framework. So many NUPF, we also tried to do some report. Tikender sir also came there also. So many things. Now we have something called AI for smart cities. Something smart cities mission and others are also trying to see how these technology things will be embedded. And now I will really ask few questions which has come. One is that in this pandemic, how does Dr. Kasha is asking, she joined from, okay, she's not here. In this pandemic, how does the city envision its women, children, and elderly population, which is more than half? In some cities, the post of mayor, etc., are reserved for women, and what can be the role of women in future Indian city governance? In Ranchi, the post of mayor is reserved for women. From my ward only, she was the mayor. And few questions which has come here, I'll just briefly read them out, and then we can have a final round. Simi has asked. Dr. Rajesh Kumar is asking again that what are the impact of climate change in Shimla town? Is there any plan by Municipal Corporation Shimla to cope up with its major issues in future? Is there any plan under smart city project in Shimla cities for this too? I really think Dr. Soumyadip will also ask that, sir, since the tourists have been low, what do you think that how the city's economy will going to survive? And Soumyadip sir, please touch upon some issues on 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, that on the political sphere, how all the roles are given there or not. Ankur Parashar is asking that as the geography of the resources to sustain a city are going to be beyond the city, for example, water sources, solid waste management, labor networks which join together cities and larger regions. In this context, how do you see the claims over the governance of the cities as only exclusive right of the city, which even exclude many migrants? How can we expand the notion of urban citizenship? Similarly, sir, the many questions are coming for peri-urban areas, villages associated with and regional development. We touched upon some of the issues. And Jigyasa Sharma is asking that how could multi-level agencies be held responsible for administrative accountability? I would say only by empowering mayors. Yes, sir, over to you. I think we have collected.
Yeah, so yes. I think I'll be very quick because I think I mean, these questions would require another session probably. Yeah. So Dr. Soumyadip,
yes,
should
please,
I?
Please.
Yeah.
Please, yes.
So I think because I've noted it down, but if I forget, please just remind me. I think pollution, I'll start from the pollution level, and especially not just pollution, but also the carbon emissions that we're talking about. Actually, yeah, our cities are highly polluted, and that's why I quoted P.B. Shelley. I mean, when P.B. Shelley wrote this poem, he spoke about pollution in London. And so it's a problem which actually is now affecting almost all the cities. But you know, what are our solutions? I mean, it's all knee-jerk. Take for example, plant trees. Take for example, this is not going to help. I think one car added to the city transport to negate the effects of one car, we require to plant 50 trees, if I'm correct. Please correct me if there's any in mind. Can we do that? What are we doing? And I will again share, because Dr. Soumyadip, allow me to share an anecdote, because I am really fond of sharing those short stories. So I did a fellowship on urban mobility from Leipzig. It's a city in Germany. And so the fascinating stories about Leipzig, and I don't know how many of you are aware, but the German cities are now planning to make their urban transport 100% free. When I say 100% free, means 100% free. A, because of pollution. B, also, of course, they'll get money from some other pocket. But at the same time, they want to reduce their carbon emissions. They want people to come over to public transport and leave their cars. And if still you have to come in a car, then they will tax you heavily. So that's one of the models that is being tried. And Leipzig was a precursor because they are the ones who initiated that. So it's a highly pedestrian and bicycle-driven city. So what they were doing is that the 8 lanes, they were squeezing those 8 lanes to 6 lanes. And those 2 lanes were further being given to the pedestrians and the cyclists. I just wanted to give you that notion. I mean, imagine, a city like Leipzig, which is highly pedestrian, highly cycle-driven. Despite that, they were further reducing their motorized transport structures and handing it over. But that's not the paradox. The paradox is that the city of Leipzig sustains its employment on the manufacturing of a car called Porsche. Now, Porsche is one of the costliest cars and one of the largest guzzlers that we have in the world. So I told this professor of mine, I said, why are you befooling us? You are creating your structures, your infrastructure, which is quite an antithesis to the manufacturing of car, but you are sustaining your city and for that matter, your employment and your city by manufacturing cars. So then why are you befooling us? I mean, then for whom are you manufacturing these cars for? Dr. Soumyadip, the funniest answer I ever got in my life is that he said, for you. You know, you have a rising middle class in India and the third world. Now this is the nexus. I mean, I'm afraid someone was saying that don't take it as a nexus. This is a nexus, sir. This is a nexus because in Himachal we have a World Bank grant which is investing some 30,000 crores to widen our roads. When we widen our roads, what is it that we are doing? We are infusing and inducing a demand for the people to buy more cars, use those guzzlers and come, thereby also increasing our pollution in the cities. So, you know, if we just, so I don't know what is there in the limit of the city, but yes, I think the city has to assert now. The city has to assert, take for example, Shimla, why I come back to Shimla, and why I'm so fascinated about this reverse metamorphosis of urban governance, because in Shimla we have certain areas, I don't know how many of you have visited Shimla, but we have certain areas, just 25% of the houses are accessible through motorized transport. 75% either have to walk or maybe some other means, but they can't take their cars. Of course, it's a mountainous because if we build more roads, it means more landslides as we are vulnerable to those landslides. So, but we have certain pockets within the town which are completely inaccessible to your motorized transport. Take for example, the mall, the ridge. And this is something that we did not create, but we inherited it from the British, of course. And if you see the difference between the cart road, where the motorized transport is I mean, where the motors run, and the mall and the ridge, I mean, there's a huge difference. It's clean, it's non-polluted. Because so what I want to say is that actually the cities must start asserting either A, for days to be non-motorized. B, there could be many mechanisms. Of course, public transport. E, subsidizing public transport like what Delhi was doing, unlike what the metro is doing. And C, also, I think creating certain kind of interventions whereby you tax the people who still want to come in their cars, or if it's quite single-driven. Actually, 70%, 65 to 70% of the pollution that is there in the cities is coming through the automobile. And after the pandemic, you know, because we have this crisis of physical distancing, people would actually scared to actually use the public transport because, you know, the kind of hygiene that we maintain in public transport. So we have seen a large jump in the purchase of these cars. So tell me, how can we just get rid of the problem? So we have a policy paradigm which forces us, which induces us to buy more cars. We have a policy paradigm which Dr. Soumyadip, that's why I mentioned that. I mean, that was purpose why I mentioned that we are encroaching on the working class, their cycle tracks, the pedestrians, and widening our roads. Despite the fact, if you see 70% to 80% of the mobility plans of the cities, which I have seen, I mean, maybe some 20 cities that I've studied, 70%, 65 to 70% people commute not more than 3 kilometers from their workplace to their homes. So what do we require? You require more pedestrian-friendly city. So it can't be so. But cities at the same time have to. So you require an intervention at the national level, at the federal level, where they have to say, hey, enough. I mean, if we have to move, so public transport has to be the key. So we require a policy paradigm for public transport. We have required a policy paradigm for more battery-driven cars. We require a policy paradigm for so at a federal level. At this city level, we require taxing the rich. I mean, it's still if people want to come, let them pay. I'm in full support of taxing the middle and the upper middle classes who still want to come to the city and use their guzzlers. I think there's no two option but to do that. So I think that's what we seriously have to, and we have to enforce that strictly. Let me tell you what we were able to do in pollution. Not just that, but Shimla has an additional actually challenge of pollution that happens to be that lots of building waste material is actually thrown into the forest. I mean, that's one form of pollution I would suggest, and where the forests get and enforcing the law. Actually, you have to be very, very strict that the enforcement of the law and actually the ability of the city government to tax and to penalize. I think that has to be. And we did many experiments, by the way. We collected lots of revenue also in the town. I think maybe 7 or 8 crores we collected just from the defaulters, and we strictly implemented that. And of course, we incentivized our officers who would check certain things. 10% of the penalty used to go to those officers, so they had a good kitty, so the chances of corruption were less. So there were a number of interventions that we need to do at the policy level and at the intervention level, which is, I think, of utmost importance. But to say and to that finish that, look, by city government's policy interventions, we'll be able to just fix everything. I would be the last person. Actually, there's a larger policy game. What can a city like Shimla do? Now we have 4 lanes. Instead of constructing a new railway track, the World Bank has funded 4 laning to Shimla, which means that if earlier we used to get, say, 3,000 cars in a day, now we'll get some 10,000 cars in a day. So what is bound to happen? You can understand. I mean, what is bound to happen? What can a poor city government do except to levy some green fees? So yeah, green fees is another option that you must actually you have to. I mean, there's another option. But at the same time, simultaneously strengthen the public transport, make it safe, make it secure. And if you're able to make it safe and secure, I think these cities can. Since I don't have time, but I would have loved to share an anecdote with the mayor of Bogota, Sheila Dixit, and I myself, all 3 of us, we were there in the panel when the Deutsche Bank and London School of Economics was organizing this. And he said, why the heck did you actually withdraw your bus rapid system in Delhi? Anyway, but that's a separate question. So I think with that, Dr. Soumyadip, I need to clinch the pollution stuff. Yes, funds, I think there's no doubt that actually a large chunk of the revenue that gets generated from the cities is, in my term, it gets usurped by the central government, income tax, GSTs and all. And I don't think the cities can do much, but of course, apart from raising that bogey of demands time and again, maybe someday when we have an environment, we can witness what the Scandinavian countries have been able to do. But nevertheless, I think what we need to do, and this is what we were able to do in Shimla, just to an astonishment, actually, when we joined the office, immediately after 6 days, the pensioners came to us that since last 6 months, we've not got our pension. And the salary, they said, and when we spoke to our commissioner, he said, we don't have the money. So that was, and why we were, concerned about pension, because we lived on pension. I mean, I lost my father very early. So his pension actually survived us, my family. So the pension was such an important element. I could actually correlate myself to the demand of those pensioners. And then we started building layers of structures whereby checking pilferage, and I'll share all those. And when we left the municipality, we made the municipality revenue surplus. How did we do that trick? I mean, there's not a big trick. The trick is that I think, of course, property tax, rationalizing property tax, whereby you actually, when I say rationalize, I mean, make it affordable to the people, not like what we had earlier. And then one of the areas, I mean, that's very funny in the slums, and actually we were the slums that were what are considered to be illegal. They were the first ones to. So people say, why should you tax this, the slum houses? So we can convince the slum dwellers that, look, if you have a tax receipt, at least there will be some entitlement that you have towards the municipal corporation. And you're the first players to come to the municipal corporation saying, hey, take our tax. I mean, we want to give tax to the municipal corporation for those who were slum dwellers and who were considered to be illegal. So yeah, we increase the tax base is, I think, something very important. But unlike other towns, I think Shimla has that ability because, as I told you, it's one of the oldest municipality. People have been giving tax, and if you go by Edward J. Buck's Shimla Past and Present in 1876, per capita municipal finance collection in those days, imagine, was 18 rupees. And imagine what 18 rupees was, Dr. So, you know, in Shimla, maybe in other towns, but yeah, you have to convince that property tax has to be an ineligible part, but it has to be rational. I mean, you can't just coerce without even providing them the basic facilities. The third area, I think, which if the city government also has in its ability, is to check pilferage and the nexus that exists in city governance structures is on the water billing stuff. We actually raised our revenues by almost 600% on water charges. Not that we increased the tariff. What we did is, the trick was that instead of providing water on average basis, we did it on volumetric basis. And actually, it's not that, I mean, there was something behind our mind. It's all of a sudden struck us, because when I saw my bill from my house and the hotelier's bill, that was the same. I said, how can that happen? The hotelier is consuming water maybe 50 times or 100 times more than me, and we have the same bill. Then we realized actually that nexus also that exists. So we broke that nexus, and we were able to jump to almost 600 times. So apart from that, I think municipal bonds, I mean, who would buy your municipal bonds? I mean, your municipality is broke, come on. You can understand municipal bonds in Mumbai, which has a huge revenue surplus, or Pimpri-Chinchwad. But don't forget, I mean, those people who speak about Pimpri-Chinchwad and Pune forget to mention that till 3 years ago, Pimpri-Chinchwad had the largest revenue from Octroi, no? You took Octroi, and instead of Octroi, you brought in the finance commission and said, okay, now you'll get the money. So you know, all those innovative methods have to be seen. And of course, green fees, I mean, tax the rich, I mean, but that also has got to have a limit. And of course, for tourism, city that has tourism, because tourism again happens to be a state subject. So all the tourism cess goes to the provincial government. It doesn't come to the city government. But and you know, after the GST, you can't levy any tax, no? But you can levy a fees. I mean, you have to be articulate in that. So if you levy some fees, green fees or something like that, maybe you can be allowed. So thirdly, I think how much data is good data? Speak about data. So again, coming back to the basic point, we require command centers. I mean, no two opinion to that point. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
So I mean, no two opinion. We require those command centers, but the point is, who would run these command centers? And these command centers must serve the purpose of its citizens, of its people, not to build an Orwellian state. I mean, kind of, you know, the super surveillance state, which also is a threat. Maybe we don't want to reach out to that level, but yeah, I think so. But then, and if the command center is usurping your entire budget for the city, and take for example, we've seen lots of these smart cities. You have grievance redressal centers, and all of a sudden you employ people 10, 15, and you're paying very handsomely to them, but the grievance doesn't get redressed. I mean, they said, hey, you're not giving us water. You're giving us water once in 5 days. So what is the point in grievance redressal center here? So I mean, all these are, I think, interrelated. But yeah, I think we require. So in pandemic and women and children, I think the least said, the better. We've seen how exposed we are. And we've also seen the latest, and I think Indian Express is doing a series of stories. We must go and read that, how the vulnerability of the girl child and especially of the women has come to the fore. And in Himachal, I'm not sure about, because I don't have the pan-India data, especially of the urban centers. But in urban centers in Himachal, we've had a spate of rise of suicides that have taken place. So it has brought in a new kind of intervention that the city government. But since health happens to be with the parastate or with the provincial government, but yeah, the dialogue has to be created how we can create those platforms for larger conversation. And above all, don't forget, it's the larger picture is the massive unemployment that has got generated, and the massive unemployment has hit the women the most in urban centers, because in the informal sector they comprise the largest section amongst the informal sectors. So yeah, I think that is about the Shimla climate change. Yes, we have a document. I think Dr. Rajesh asked that question, and the climate change document is there. And not just that, but Shimla has an additional advantage that Shimla was even able to create its own atlas. So Shimla has been able to measure the vulnerability even to the ward level. It's a beautiful thing that has happened. So each and every ward, and that measuring of the vulnerability did not happen from top to bottom, but it was an exercise from bottom to top, whereby it took lots of time. I think it took almost 2 years for us to do that. It's a beautiful document, by the way, whereby we have measured our vulnerability vis-a-vis our landslides, rain, and of course we don't get snow avalanches, but we get slides because of snow and the tree felling that takes place. The tree falls once we have large snow. So we have that. But the point is, when the disaster strike, and the CDMA that has been approved is the City Disaster Management Plan of Action, whereby the authority happens to be the city council. And we've seen that contradictory thing happening even in the pandemic. The call is not taken by the city government. The call is taken by the district magistrate. And the district magistrate takes care of the district, not just the city, not just to the city precincts. So I think we have to revise when we measure our vulnerabilities, and when we create our climate atlas, and when we create the impact of climate change that is going to happen in the cities, I think the onus and the responsibility must also get transferred to the city. That repeatedly I've been asking. I don't know. Even with the NDMA, where we had a webinar with the NDMA. So I think that is one of the areas that we need to focus on. We have to build those CDMAs, the City Disaster Management Plan of Actions, and also ratify them, which means that you have to give the authority to the City Council. Yeah, tourist law definitely, and it has severely affected the employment. I think there was a study done by one of the trade unions in Shimla, and almost 70% of the people were dependent on the tourism flow. So 6 months they went back, so it's a serious challenge. And during that pandemic, some of the hoteliers were even able to lay off their workmen, and some of them have started. Most of them have started, but a few still have not started as yet. So it's a serious challenge. But there's one thing which I missed, Dr. Soumyadip, and I think with this question, it just struck my mind. I think I must share. Shimla also has been able to bring in the Urban Employment Guarantee Act, the Himachal Pradesh government. I think one of the important areas that we should look into throughout the country is I think 2 state governments have launched the employment guarantee: Chhattisgarh,
Odisha.
Sorry, Odisha and Himachal Pradesh. But what we have seen in Shimla and Dharamsala is that most of the workmen are not doing civil works. So most of them are into brooming the roads, because what they do is they will broom the road for 3 hours and then switch over to some other work. So I don't think that is the purpose of employment. Of course, that is one of the purposes, that at least they will get some respite. But beyond that, I think we really have to work on it. Of course, there are many facets to it. And there are many players who are into it, working on it. But we really, so it's a good thing that has happened in Himachal Pradesh, that at least some budgetary outlay has there. And the other good thing is that it is monitored by the city government. It's not monitored by a parastatal. So it's a good thing, but I think more needs to be done as far as this urban employment guarantee scheme is concerned. So it's a good thing that has happened. And yeah, I think geography of resources, I'm telling you, there's a big crisis that is going to happen. You take our fresh water and you throw the filth into our heads. That's what the peri-urbans have been saying. Huh? So the geography, that's a serious issue. And that's why what we have been focusing, that's why I said people's participation planning. Ian McCarthy wrote a book long ago, 1960s, Planning with Nature. So in Delhi, take for example, in Delhi, now Delhi is about to get water from my state. So they are constructing a dam in Renuka, that's in Sirmaur district, whereby I think some 50 odd villages would be translocated. They will lose their identity just to feed the water to Delhi residents. It sounds good, Dr. Soumyadip, but not realizing that actually what is the loss that you're doing. And there are different studies. There's an interesting book written by one of our friends called The Assorted City. That's in Delhi. Suptendra Biswas. So it's a very interesting work that he's done on Delhi itself. According to him, if we are able to just tap some 60% of the rainwater in Delhi, the Delhi would be able to suffice its 90% water demand. It doesn't have to go to Shimla. It doesn't have to go to some other canal to get water. But the consultants won't draw such a plan. So they would draw a plan for a larger intervention. Then you will have a World Bank funding. Then you will have an international bid. That international bid fund will come from there. Is it not a nexus than what it is? You could have easily done that. It's not a big deal. So that's an interesting work. And I think that's also an answer to many of the questions. The Assorted City, by Suptendra Biswas, definitely measures some of the important things. So yeah, I think the draining the resources from the peri-urbans, it's so important. I remember in the Prime Minister's constituency, I visited there once, and the mayor happened to be from the BJP. The MLA happened to be the BJP, and the MLA was threatening the mayor. He said, "You stop throwing garbage on my head, and if you don't, then I will not allow your garbage trucks to come to my." So so that challenge exists almost invariably everywhere. So, and because you have a large waste to energy plant which can't be in the city, so you go out of the city. Instead, you could have those decentralized solutions. That's why I'm so focused for these decentralized solutions, where you would actually have been able to meet some of the challenges. Maybe not all the challenges, but some of the challenges. So I think that's why that revising the entire thing, we have to go back to the basics. And lastly, I think what has been said by multi-level agencies, you require those multi-level agencies. I'm not saying, where you do not have, but I think how do you fix the responsibility, accountability, and who will monitor it? I think that is something which has to be laid. Imagining that, look, ye to chalta hai. This practice has to end. And if you're able to do even an iota of our intervention into checking this practice and making institutions function, maybe they do not have, maybe they are starved of funds, maybe they are starved of people, but I think it will be a great service. I think that's all.
Well, thank you so much for being so elaborate, and also you have raised so many questions and so many issues, I think, which we will be discussing in our forthcoming city conversation seminar. For example, you mentioned about Suptendra Biswas. In fact, Suptendra Biswas will be delivering a lecture on the similar issues.
Okay.
We expect you also to come and join that particular seminar.
Sure. It's a fascinating work, by the way. His work is fascinating.
Yes. And we are also fortunate to have him. He has already agreed to give us a lecture. So he will be delivering one talk on this city conversation topic.
I will give him a call. Maybe Tikender sir can chair that session. That will be
great. And in fact, really, it's a rare opportunity for us to hear from two people who are directly associated, one with the municipal administration, city government, and another the state government and the pastoral agencies. So, and it's a wonderful opportunity. It's a rare as well as wonderful opportunity to hear from both of you. And just if I want to wrap it up, then the basic problem what I understand is that there is a lack of understanding of like who is planning for whom. This is the basic question. And here I do not I could not resist myself from quoting Richard Byrd, one of the famous public finance expert, who just to describe this typical urban conundrum, he actually mentioned that there is a classic problem: the central government or the state parastatal, they do not know what to plan, and the local government, they do not know how to plan. So this is a conundrum that we are facing, and and so taking clue from both of your lectures, like Professor like Mr. Samir Unale and also of you, what I can understand is that given the local level capacity problem of the city governments, it is necessary to take help from the parastatal agencies, from the state government, from the SPPs and all these things. But that should not be at the cost of marginalization of the elected city representatives.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need yes, so which we need to be very much careful about, or to plan accordingly about to institutionalize our governance structure, participatory governance structure. And I think India has a it is evident from your lecture also that India has a long way to go to institutionalize this entire participatory governance structure if we really want to make our cities livable and sustainable in the near future, as well as if we really make our cities resilient. Okay, so it's really wonderful. Once again, I am thankful to very much on behalf of Team IMPRI. We are really thankful, Mr. Panwar, and I'm also thankful to all of our participants who spend like we have already stretched our time, but many of them, they still are with us. So we are really fortunate to have all of you with us. And just let me announce that on October 15th, we are going to have our second lecture on this city conversation, and that will be given by Mr. Ravikant Joshi. He is with CRISIL, and he will be speaking on the state of finances of Indian cities. Another crucial aspect. I think some of the aspects we already Mr. Panwar has touched upon, but we will be hearing in lot detail on the finances of state issues on October 15th lecture. So I request all of you to please do join us on October 15th as well. So for now, it's thank you once again to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for Tikender sir for really
Thank you.
short notice.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
giving.
I hope I was able to do some justice to it. I don't know.
Sure.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm sharing you all the link. Yes, video. We can all share.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much once again. Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Have a nice day.